When Amara, a displaced Nigerian journalist, stumbles upon evidence that her Korean employer's humanitarian foundation is being sabotaged from within, she faces an impossible choice: expose the truth and lose her asylum status, or stay silent and watch an innocent man's legacy be destroyed. But speaking up means entering a world of political intrigue she's unprepared for and developing feelings for a man whose trust she desperately needs, but cannot fully claim. In the space between two cultures, two broken people must decide if salvation is worth the cost of vulnerability. Welcome to Afro-Korean Vibes, where East meets West and love knows no borders. Hit that subscribe button and join our family as we explore stories of passion, danger, and destiny. Today's story will take you on a journey you won't forget. The rain fell differently in Seoul. Not like the monsoons Amara remembered from Lagos. Those came with warning, with the smell of wet earth and the sudden darkening of a familiar sky. Here, the rain arrived like an afterthought, cold and persistent, turning the city into a watercolor painting where everything bled into everything else. Amara stood beneath the awning of the Hanamdong office building, watching well-dressed professionals hurry past with their identical black umbrellas. 6 months in South Korea, and she still felt like a ghost moving through someone else's dream. The weight of her press credentials, now worthless, sat heavy in her bag beside the rejection letter from the third publication that week. "You're qualified, Ms. Okafor, but we're looking for someone with local experience." Local experience. The polite way of saying, you don't belong here. She checked her phone. One unread message from her sister back home. Any news? Amara typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, still looking. Don't worry. The lie tasted familiar. Excuse me. The voice was quiet, formal, distinctly Korean. Amara looked up to find a woman in her 60s, elegant in a charcoal suit, holding a leather portfolio against the rain. "Are you Amara Okafor?" the woman asked in careful English. Amara's spine straightened. "Yes. My name is Dr. Park Seo-yeon. I work for the John Foundation. We received your application for the communications coordinator position." She paused, studying Amara with sharp, assessing eyes. "We'd like to speak with you today, if you're available." Amara's heart kicked against her ribs. The John Foundation, she'd applied 3 weeks ago, a Hail Mary after exhausting every journalism contact she had. A humanitarian organization focused on refugee resettlement, education programs, international development. Respectable. Stable. Everything she needed. "I'm available," Amara said, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. Dr. Park's expression didn't change, but something softened at the edges. "Follow me, please." The Foundation's headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of the building. Clean lines, minimalist design, walls covered with photographs from field projects across Africa and Southeast Asia. Amara recognized some of the locations, refugee camps she'd reported from, villages she'd documented. The work was real. That mattered. Dr. Park led her through a maze of corridors to a corner office overlooking the Han River. "Wait here," she said. "Mr. John will join you shortly." Then she was alone with the view and her racing thoughts. Amara forced herself to breathe, to prepare. This wasn't journalism anymore. She couldn't challenge, couldn't investigate, couldn't push for truth the way she'd been trained. She needed this job. Needed the visa extension it would provide. Needed to stay invisible long enough to figure out what came next. The door opened behind her. "Ms. Okafor." She turned. The man who entered was younger than she'd expected, late 30s, perhaps, dressed simply in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. His face was composed, reserved in that particularly Korean way that revealed nothing, but his eyes were tired. Deeply, profoundly tired. "I'm John Min-jae," he said, extending his hand. His English was flawless, American accented. "Thank you for coming." His handshake was brief, professional. He gestured for her to sit, then took the chair across from her, not behind the desk, but beside her, closing the distance without presuming intimacy. "I read your background," Min-jae continued. "Your reporting from the Niger Delta crisis was exceptional. Brave." He paused. "And dangerous, I imagine." Amara kept her face neutral. It was necessary. You exposed government corruption in the refugee aid distribution. 3 officials were arrested. His gaze was steady, evaluating. You also received multiple death threats and had to leave Nigeria. There it was. The truth she'd been trying to bury under professional credentials and carefully worded resumes. Yes, Amara said quietly. I did what journalists are supposed to do. And I paid for it. Minjae leaned back slightly. Why communications? Why not continue journalism here? Because journalism requires institutional support I no longer have. Because my asylum application is pending and I can't afford to make waves. Because she stopped herself, surprised by her own honesty. Because I need to survive before I can fight again. Silence stretched between them. Outside, the rain intensified. My father founded this organization 30 years ago, Minjae finally said. He believed that helping displaced people rebuild their lives was the highest form of service. When he died 2 years ago, I inherited not just his work, but his vision. He met her eyes. I need someone who understands what displacement feels like. Someone who won't romanticize suffering or reduce people to statistics. Someone who can tell our stories with integrity. Amara's throat tightened. You're offering me the position? On a trial basis. 3 months. He stood, moving to the window. But I should be honest with you, Ms. Okafor. This foundation is complicated. There are board members who opposed my father's methods, who want to reshape our mission into something more profitable, less idealistic. The work isn't just communication, it's protection. Of values. Of truth. Something in his voice made Amara pause. There was a warning hidden in those words, a test disguised as transparency. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Minjae turned to face her. Because you asked for a job, and I'm offering you a purpose. But only if you're willing to see what others prefer to ignore. Amara held his gaze. In that moment, she recognized something familiar in his exhaustion, the weight of holding too much truth alone. When do I start? She said. The corner of his mouth lifted, almost imperceptibly. Tomorrow. Dr. Park will handle the paperwork. Welcome to the John Foundation, Ms. Okafor. As Amara left the building that evening, rain still falling, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just agreed to something far more complicated than a job. She had no idea how right she was. The first 2 weeks were deceptively simple. Amara learned the foundation's structure, met the program directors, reviewed grant proposals and field reports. The work was meaningful: education scholarships for North Korean defectors, vocational training for refugees from Myanmar, medical supply chains to South Sudan. She wrote press releases, managed social media, coordinated with partner organizations. It felt good to use her skills for something constructive again. But she also noticed the gaps. Conversations that stopped when she entered rooms. Documents that disappeared from shared drives. Board meetings. Minjae emerged from looking more exhausted than usual. And there was Director Kwon. Kwon Ji-hoon was the foundation's chief financial officer, a man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He treated Amara with careful politeness, the way one might handle something fragile and potentially dangerous. You're settling in well, he asked one afternoon, appearing in her office doorway unannounced. Yes, thank you, Amara replied, closing the budget file she'd been reviewing. Good, good. He didn't move. You know, Ms. Okafor, this organization has a delicate balance. We serve many interests, donors, government partners, international agencies. It's important that our public communications maintain discretion. Amara met his gaze. I understand professional discretion, Director Kwon. Of course. His smile tightened. I'm sure you do. Just remember, you're no longer an investigative journalist. Some questions are better left unasked. After he left, Amara sat very still, her instincts screaming. She knew a threat when she heard one, even wrapped in courtesy. That evening, she stayed late, alone in the office. The budget file she'd been reviewing earlier had shown a discrepancy, nothing massive, but noticeable. $300,000 allocated to a Syrian refugee medical program that, according to the field reports, had received significantly less funding. Amara pulled up the financial statements, cross-referencing them with project documentation. The numbers didn't match. Money was being moved, redirected, hidden behind bureaucratic language and complex accounting. Her journalist brain kicked into gear, methodical and relentless. She began building a file, carefully documenting every inconsistency, every suspicious transaction. She knew she should stop. Knew she was risking the very stability she'd fought so hard to secure. But she'd never been good at looking away. Minjae noticed when Amara started asking questions. Subtle ones, framed as innocent clarification, but questions nonetheless. The financial reports, she said one morning during their weekly coordination meeting. I'm trying to write a donor impact summary, but the funding figures for several programs don't align with the outcomes data. He looked up from his laptop, his expression unreadable. What do you mean? For example, the Syrian medical program. We report spending $300,000, but the actual equipment purchases and salary disbursements total less than half that. Minjae's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Financial reporting can be complex. There are overhead costs, administrative allocations. I understand overhead, Amara interrupted gently. This is different. The money isn't being spent. It's being moved. Silence filled the office. Outside, Seoul hummed with its usual indifferent energy. Ms. Okafor, Minjae said carefully, I appreciate your thoroughness. But these are sensitive matters that require. I know what embezzlement looks like, Mr. John. The words hung between them, irreversible. Minjae stood abruptly, moving to close the office door. When he turned back, his composed mask had cracked just enough for her to see the exhaustion beneath. How much have you found? He asked quietly. Amara's heart pounded. Enough to know it's systematic. Enough to know someone on your board is stealing from the very people you're trying to help. He closed his eyes briefly. You should have left this alone. Should I have? Amara stood to face him. When I was reporting in Nigeria, people told me to leave things alone. To stop asking questions. 300 children died because aid money was stolen, Mr. John. I didn't leave it alone then, and I can't now. This isn't Nigeria. No, she agreed. But corruption looks the same everywhere. Minjae stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression, respect, perhaps, or resignation. I've known about the discrepancies for 6 months, he finally admitted. My father's death created a power vacuum. Certain board members saw an opportunity. I've been trying to build a case internally, but without proof solid enough to withstand legal scrutiny. I can get you proof, Amara said. You'll lose your job. Possibly your visa status. Then help me protect both while we expose them. Minjae looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Why would you risk everything for an organization you've worked at for 2 weeks? Amara met his gaze steadily. Because some fights matter more than safety. And because I think you've been fighting alone too long. Something unspoken passed between them, recognition, understanding, the dangerous beginning of trust. If we do this, Minjae said slowly, it has to be careful. Strategic. And you have to promise me something. What? If it gets too dangerous, you walk away. You don't sacrifice your life for my father's legacy. Amara smiled faintly. I don't make promises I can't keep. Then we're both in trouble, Minjae replied, but there was the ghost of a smile on his face too. That night, they stayed late in his office, reviewing financial documents, building a timeline of suspicious transactions. Minjae ordered food, Korean fried chicken and tteokbokki, and they ate while poring over spreadsheets, their careful professional distance gradually dissolving into something more collaborative, more equal. Tell me about your father, Amara said around midnight, needing a break from numbers. Minjae leaned back in his chair, rolling his shoulders. He was principled to the point of impracticality. He believed people were inherently good, that providing opportunity was enough to change lives. He paused. I loved him, but I also saw how his idealism made him vulnerable. How people took advantage of his trust. And you? Amara asked. What do you believe? I believe trust has to be earned. That protecting what matters sometimes requires being ruthless. He looked at her. What about you? What does a journalist believe after being forced into silence? Amara considered the question. That silence is just another strategy. That sometimes you have to retreat to fight better. Is that what this is for you? Min-jae's voice was softer now. A fight? Isn't it for you? He didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weariness that went beyond exhaustion. I'm tired of fighting, Ms. Okafor. But I don't know how to stop. Amara understood that bone deep. Then maybe we fight together. Just until this one is finished. Min-jae held her gaze, and for a moment, the careful walls they'd both constructed seemed dangerously thin. Amara, he said, using her first name for the first time. You should call me Min-jae. If we're going to commit professional suicide together, we might as well be on first-name terms. She laughed, startled by the unexpected humor. Deal. Min-jae. The way he smiled, small, genuine, unguarded, made something in her chest tighten with warning. This was how it started, she realized. Not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with shared purpose and stolen smiles over late-night takeout. This was how you began caring about someone you couldn't afford to care about. She should have been more careful. But it was already too late. Over the next 3 weeks, Amara and Min-jae fell into a careful rhythm. Days were professional, meetings, program reviews, donor calls. But nights became theirs, stolen hours in his office after everyone else had gone home, piecing together evidence of a conspiracy that went deeper than either had initially suspected. The pattern became clear. Director Kwon wasn't working alone. He'd cultivated relationships with 3 other board members, all of whom had connections to construction companies, medical supply firms, and logistics operations. They were using the foundation as a front, inflating contracts with their own companies, skimming money meant for vulnerable people, and burying the evidence in layers of legitimate-looking paperwork. It's elegant, Amara admitted grudgingly one night, highlighting another suspicious invoice. They're not stealing large amounts at once. Just consistent percentages over time. 5% here, 7% there. It adds up to millions, but spread across dozens of projects, it's nearly invisible. Min-jae rubbed his temples, exhausted. They'd been at this for 4 hours. My father trusted these people. Some of them were his friends for decades. I'm sorry, Amara said quietly. Don't be. You're giving me the truth. That's more valuable than comfort. He looked at her across the desk. How did you do this? In Nigeria, I mean. How did you keep going when everyone wanted you to stop? Amara set down her pen, considering. I had a mentor. An older journalist named Chioma. She used to say, the truth doesn't need permission to exist. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it. She smiled sadly. She was killed 3 months before I had to leave. Car accident, officially. But everyone knew. Min-jae's expression darkened. I'm asking you to risk that again. No, Amara corrected. I'm choosing to risk it. There's a difference. He stood, moving to the window, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass. You could have anyone's protection you wanted, Amara. Your skills, your experience. You could work for a major news organization, get proper security, resources. Why stay here? Because of you, she thought but didn't say. Because you see me as more than a displaced person needing rescue. Because working beside you feels like remembering who I used to be. Because this matters, she said instead. And because you need someone who can't be intimidated by the board. My visa status makes me vulnerable, yes. But it also makes me dangerous. I have nothing to lose that they can threaten me with. Min-jae turned to face her. You have your life. I've already lost that once. I know how to survive it. Something shifted in his expression, concern, admiration, and something else she couldn't quite name. He crossed the room slowly, stopping just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You're not alone this time, he said quietly. Whatever happens, you're not alone. Amara's breath caught. She was acutely aware of the space between them, the way the office felt smaller suddenly, more intimate. His cologne, something woody and subtle, mixed with the coffee they'd been drinking for hours. Min-jae, she began, but her phone buzzed violently on the desk, shattering the moment. She grabbed it, frowning at the unknown number. A message in Korean, which she fed through her translation app. Stop asking questions or you'll regret it. This is your only warning. Min-jae read it over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. They know. Good, Amara said, forcing steadiness into her voice despite the fear crawling up her spine. Means we're getting close. This isn't a game, Amara. These people are. I know what these people are, she interrupted. I've dealt with worse. But if we stop now, they win. Is that what you want? Min-jae looked at her for a long moment, conflict clear in his eyes. Finally, he said, we need to be smarter. More careful. From now on, we don't work here. Too many eyes, too much surveillance. Where then? My apartment. It's secure, private. And he hesitated. I can make sure you're safe. Amara knew she should refuse. Should maintain professional boundaries, keep distance between her growing feelings and the dangerous work they were doing. But practicality won. Okay, she agreed. Your place. Min-jae's apartment was in Itaewon, tucked away on a quiet street lined with ginkgo trees. It was smaller than she expected, one bedroom, a living space that flowed into an open kitchen, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Personal in a way his office wasn't. Books in Korean and English, photographs of his father, a guitar in the corner collecting dust. You play? Amara asked, nodding toward it. Used to. Before. He trailed off, setting his laptop on the low coffee table. Make yourself comfortable. I'll get us something to drink. Amara settled on the floor, her back against the couch, spreading documents around her. Through the kitchen pass-through, she watched Min-jae move with quiet efficiency, heating water, preparing tea. There was something meditative about his movements, like he needed the ritual to center himself. Green tea okay? He asked. Perfect. He joined her on the floor, close enough that their knees nearly touched. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the city humming beyond the windows, until Amara's stomach growled audibly. Min-jae glanced at his watch. It's past midnight. When did you last eat? Lunch? Maybe? She'd honestly forgotten. He stood decisively. I'm making ramen. No arguments. I wasn't going to argue. While he cooked, Amara let herself observe him more openly than she could at the office. The way his shoulders carried tension even when he was trying to relax. The small scar above his left eyebrow. The unconscious habit of running his hand through his hair when frustrated. Why did you take over the foundation? She asked. You could have sold it, walked away, built your own life. Min-jae stirred the pot slowly. I tried. After my father died, I spent 3 months in New York, pretending I could start over. But guilt is a persistent thing. He turned to face her. He died suddenly. Heart attack. We'd argued the week before about the foundation's direction. I thought he was being reckless, trusting the wrong people. I told him he was naive. And now you know you were right. Now I know that being right doesn't matter when someone is gone. His voice was quiet, pained. I came back to honor him. To protect what he built. Even if it means fighting people he considered family. Amara stood, moving to the kitchen counter. He'd be proud of you. Would he? Min-jae's smile was bitter. I'm preparing to destroy his friends, dismantle the board he assembled, expose corruption that will damage the foundation's reputation. My father believed in redemption, in second chances. I'm ending people's careers. You're protecting vulnerable people from being exploited, Amara corrected firmly. That's what he would have wanted. That's what he built the foundation to do. Min-jae studied her face, something raw and vulnerable in his expression. How do you do that? Do what? Make me believe things can be okay. The words hung between them, honest and dangerous. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. She should step back, should maintain distance. Instead, she said, because I've been where you are. When I left Nigeria, I thought I'd destroyed my career, betrayed my colleagues, abandoned my country. But my mentor, before she died, she told me something I didn't understand until recently. What? She said, exile isn't failure. It's another form of witness. You're not running away. You're surviving to fight another day. Amara's voice softened. You're not betraying your father, Min-jae. You're continuing his work by refusing to let it be corrupted. He was very close now, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried alone. Thank you, he said quietly. For saying that. For being here. Min-jae. The ramen boiled over, hissing loudly. They both startled, the moment breaking. Min-jae turned back to rescue dinner, and Amara retreated to the living room, her pulse racing. This was getting complicated. More complicated than she could afford. They ate in careful silence, then returned to work, both of them deliberately maintaining more physical space. But the awareness remained charged, present, impossible to ignore. Around 3 in the morning, Amara found the smoking gun. "Min-jae," she said, her voice tight with excitement and dread. "Look at this." She'd cross-referenced bank transfer dates with board meeting minutes. Every suspicious transaction occurred within 48 hours of a meeting where Director Kwon had presented revised budget projections. He was using access to real-time financial data to time his thefts perfectly, knowing exactly when oversight would be minimal. "This proves intent," Min-jae said, reading over her shoulder. "This is conspiracy, not administrative error." "We have enough for criminal charges," Amara confirmed. "Question is, what do we do with it?" Min-jae was quiet for a long moment. "We need to be strategic. If we go to the police now, Kwon will claim administrative confusion, use his connections to bury the investigation. We need public pressure first. Media exposure." "I can't," Amara said immediately. "Any publication that runs my byline risks connecting this to my asylum case. It could be used to claim I'm politically motivated, that I'm targeting Korean institutions." "I wasn't suggesting you write it," Min-jae interrupted gently. "But you know journalists. People who would handle this story properly." Amara did. She had contacts from her international reporting days, journalists at major outlets who understood corruption stories, who wouldn't be intimidated by powerful board members. "There's someone," she said slowly. "A reporter at The Guardian. We worked together covering refugee displacement in East Africa. She's good. Careful. She'd verify everything before publishing. Can you trust her? With this?" "Yes." Amara met his eyes. "But once we do this, there's no taking it back. Your foundation will be under scrutiny. Donors might pull funding. Your father's reputation could be questioned." "My father's reputation will be honored," Min-jae said firmly, "by ensuring his work actually helps people instead of enriching thieves." He took her hand, the gesture surprising them both. "I'm ready. Are you?" His hand was warm, steady. Amara looked down at their intertwined fingers, at this man who'd given her purpose when she'd lost her own, who'd trusted her when trust was dangerous. "I'm ready," she said. They sent the evidence package at dawn, encrypted and thorough. Then they waited. The response came faster than expected. Amara's contact called within hours, voice tight with professional excitement. "Amara, this is massive. I need to verify some details, conduct interviews. Can you facilitate direct contact with John Min-jae?" "I'll arrange it," Amara confirmed. "But my name stays out of this." "Completely." "Understood. I'll credit it to internal foundation sources. But Amara, you need to be careful. Stories like this, people get hurt." "I know," Amara said quietly. "I've got scars to prove it." The investigation moved quickly after that. The journalist was professional, relentless. She interviewed current and former staff, reviewed the documents Amara provided, built an independent case that didn't rely solely on their evidence. But Director Kwon wasn't stupid. He felt the pressure, saw the signs. 3 days before publication, Amara received another message. "You brought this on yourself." That night, leaving the foundation office alone, Min-jae had been in back-to-back meetings. Amara felt it before she saw it, the prickling awareness of being followed. She quickened her pace, taking a familiar route toward the subway station, phone in hand ready to call Min-jae. But when she turned the corner onto a quieter street, 2 men stepped out from a parked car. They didn't speak, didn't threaten verbally, just moved toward her with clear intent. Amara ran. She'd learned to fight in Lagos, to carry pepper spray, to know escape routes. But this was Seoul, a city whose geography she didn't know intimately, and they were faster, organized. A hand grabbed her shoulder. She spun, spraying wildly, hearing a cry of pain. But the second man was already there, grabbing her bag, shoving her hard against a wall. "Stop asking questions," he hissed in Korean-accented English. Final warning. Then they were gone, disappearing into the darkness as suddenly as they'd appeared, leaving Amara trembling against cold brick, her bag stolen, her phone gone. She made it to a convenience store, borrowed a phone from a concerned clerk, and called Min-jae with shaking hands. He arrived in minutes, face white with fury and fear. He didn't ask questions in the street, just got her into his car and drove straight to his apartment, his jaw tight, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Inside, Amara collapsed onto his couch, adrenaline crash hitting hard. Min-jae brought her water, a blanket, then sat across from her, giving her space, but clearly struggling not to close the distance. "Tell me what happened," he said quietly. She did, keeping her voice steady through force of will. When she finished, Min-jae stood abruptly, pacing. "That's it," he said. "We pull back. The story can run without your involvement." "No," Amara interrupted. "They just threatened you, Amara. They threatened me in Nigeria too. With worse. And I'm still here." She stood to face him. "If I back down every time someone tries to scare me, I'll spend my whole life running. Then maybe you should run." Min-jae's voice rose, real fear breaking through his control. "Maybe you should prioritize your life over this." "Why?" Amara shot back. "So you can keep carrying everything alone? So you can protect everyone except yourself? That's my choice. And this is mine." They stood facing each other, breathing hard, the truth of what they'd been avoiding hanging between them like smoke. "I can't lose you," Min-jae said finally, voice rough. I can't do this if something happens to you." Amara's anger drained away, leaving something more vulnerable. "Min-jae, I know we said professional. I know the boundaries. But I'm standing here terrified that someone hurt you because I asked you to help me, and I can't pretend anymore that this is just about the foundation." Her heart hammered. "What is it about?" He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides. "You. It's about you. About the way you make me remember why any of this matters. About how you're the bravest person I've ever met, and you don't even see it." His hands came up to frame her face, gentle, asking permission. "Tell me to stop, and I will. Tell me this is a mistake, and I'll step back. But please don't ask me to pretend I don't care whether you're safe." Amara's breath caught. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings about power dynamics, about vulnerability, about needing this job, this visa, this stability. But there was a louder truth. She'd been half in love with him for weeks, and denying it was just another form of lying. "It's not a mistake," she whispered. "But Min-jae, I'm not staying in Korea forever. My asylum case, even if it's approved, I want to go home eventually. To do my real work. And you have this foundation, this legacy." "I don't care about eventually," he interrupted. "I care about now. About having you beside me for whatever time we have." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Is that enough? Can that be enough?" Amara closed her eyes, letting herself feel the warmth of his hands, the steadiness of his presence. "It has to be," she said. "Because I can't walk away from you. I've tried." Min-jae kissed her then, soft, careful, like she was something precious that might break. Amara melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, weeks of tension and denial finally finding release. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Min-jae rested his forehead against hers. "Stay here tonight. Please. Where I know you're safe." "Okay," Amara agreed. "But Min-jae, this doesn't change what we need to do. The story still runs. We still finish this." "I know," he said. "But now we do it together. Properly together." They spent that night talking, curled together on his couch, piecing together not just evidence, but their own stories. Min-jae told her about growing up in his father's shadow, about the pressure of inherited expectations, about the loneliness of never feeling like he belonged anywhere. Amara told him about Lagos, about Chioma, about the specific terror of being hunted by people who believed silence could be purchased with fear. And somewhere in those shared confessions, they stopped being just allies and became something more, partners, with all the vulnerability and strength that implied. The Guardian article ran on a Thursday morning. The headline was devastating: Humanitarian Foundation embezzlement, millions stolen from refugee programs. The story detailed everything: the systematic theft, the board members involved, the fake contracts, the betrayal of trust. Director Kwon was named explicitly. So were his co-conspirators. By noon, Korean media had picked it up. By evening, the foundation's board had called an emergency meeting. By the next morning, police had opened a formal investigation. Director Kwon tried to fight back, issuing denials, threatening counter-lawsuits. But the evidence was overwhelming, independently verified, irrefutable. Within a week, he and 3 other board members had resigned. Within 2 weeks, charges were filed. The foundation's work didn't stop. Min Jae addressed staff and donors directly, promising transparency, reform, and renewed commitment to the original mission. Some donors withdrew, nervous about the scandal. But others, impressed by his honesty, increased their support. Amara worked alongside him through it all, managing communications, rebuilding trust, proving that the foundation was more than its corrupt leadership. Her asylum case, surprisingly, benefited from the exposure. Immigration officials, aware of the high-profile investigation, expedited her application. Within 3 months, she received approval for long-term residency. She should have felt nothing but relief. Instead, she felt the weight of choice settling on her shoulders. The foundation stabilized over the following months. New board members were appointed, financial oversight strengthened, programs expanded. Min Jae worked himself to exhaustion, determined to prove the foundation could recover. Amara stayed. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because the work mattered, and because Min Jae mattered more than she'd expected anyone to matter again. They kept their relationship private, professional at the office, intimate at home. It worked until Amara received an email that changed everything. Amara, I hope this message finds you well. My name is Adizo Koro. I'm the new editor of the Lagos Tribune. We're rebuilding the investigative team, and your name keeps coming up. I know you're in Seoul, but I wanted to ask, would you consider coming home? We need journalists who understand what courage costs. We need you. Amara read the email 3 times, her heart fracturing. Home. Real journalism. The work she'd always dreamed of doing, in the place she'd never stopped missing. She found Min Jae in his office that evening, staring at budget reports. Can we talk? She asked. He looked up, immediately sensing something serious. Of course. She showed him the email. Watched his expression carefully shudder, protecting himself against loss. You should go, he said quietly. Min Jae. I'm serious, Amara. This is what you've wanted. To go back, to do your real work. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I won't be the reason you give up your calling. Amara sat across from him. What if I don't want to choose? What do you mean? I mean, what if I go back for 6 months? Build the program, train journalists, help stabilize things. Then come back here. Split my time. She took his hand. My calling is journalism, yes. But it's also this. You. Us. The work we're doing together. Min Jae looked at their joined hands, conflict clear in his face. That's not sustainable long term. Maybe not. But maybe we don't need forever figured out right now. Maybe we just need to try. You do that. His voice was careful, afraid to hope. Come back. Seoul is home now too, Amara said simply. Not the way Lagos is, but you're here. And I'm not ready to let go of that. Min Jae pulled her into his arms, holding tight. 6 months, he said into her hair. I can survive 6 months if I know you're coming back. I'm coming back, Amara promised. I chose you once. I'm choosing you again. Amara left for Lagos on a rainy Tuesday, Min Jae driving her to the airport, both of them trying to be brave. Call me when you land, he said, thumb brushing her cheek. I will. And Min Jae, thank you. For trusting me. For fighting beside me. For choosing me too. He kissed her, slow and deep, a promise without words. The 6 months were harder than expected. Long distance, time zones, the constant ache of missing someone who'd become essential. But they made it work, video calls at odd hours, shared documents on new projects, emails full of small details that kept them connected. Amara rebuilt the Lagos Tribune's investigative team, training young journalists in ethical reporting, in courage tempered with wisdom. She wrote stories that mattered, exposing corruption, amplifying voices that needed hearing. She remembered why she'd become a journalist in the first place. But she also counted days until she could return to Seoul. When she finally walked back into the John Foundation headquarters, Min-jae was waiting in the lobby, having rearranged his entire schedule to be there. He didn't say anything, just crossed the space between them and held her like she was the answer to every question he'd been asking. "Welcome home," he murmured. And Amara realized something profound. Home wasn't one place or one calling. Home was the courage to fight for what mattered, the grace to heal from what broke you, and the love you chose to protect even when it was complicated. Home was here. Home was Lagos. Home was wherever she chose truth and justice, and this man who'd taught her that vulnerability could be strength. "I'm home," she agreed. "Let's get back to work." Together, they walked into the building, ready to face whatever came next, not as a rescued refugee and her savior, not as employer and employee, but as equals who'd fought their way to something real. And that, Amara thought, was worth every risk she'd taken.